Oh, hey. Yeah, Dev Live. What a fucking day. Holy crap. How y'all doing? You okay? I need to shave. Holy cow. Yeah, we had a family member had a family member inhale a piece of food into their lung. And so they have to put them into general anesthetic and then go in there with a microscopic grabber and get the piece of um, food out of their lungs, or else it can turn into perpetual pneumonia. So I have not slept. Well, I have actually, right? So the food scoopy, exactly. Do you ever get writer's block in the middle of writing a song? How do you get past it? Okay, I see a bunch of questions um, coming in now. I wanted to just come on and say, hey, I think it's important for everybody to sort of stay in contact during this period where it is so profoundly weird, right? Um, so I started the podcast and I'm just uploading it now onto this Anchor thing. Man, I'm having to learn all these different. Thank you. It is good to be back. I'm having to learn all these different formats for social interaction, which is actually good. It's nice to be able to continuously learn, but I'm just shocked at the amount of sites and companies and Streamlabs and OBS and Twitch and Anchor and all these things, man. All right, so here's a bunch of questions here. So I've been asked. Okay, so let me see. What's up? That's a great way to start. Me, I wish I could actually grow facial hair because what ends up happening is I get this shit and it's not actually facial hair, but I have to shave nonetheless, right? Hi, Devin, just found out about you streaming. So basically the idea with the streams is that I want to perform and I want to do my Pro Tools stuff, but today has just been a crazy day and I've got to contend with a lot of things. So I do have a little bit of time, so I figured I'd just use that to distract myself. Wow, thank you. Thanks, man. Thank you for the donation. You've been very generous, Mr. Donation Guy. My screen is small, so I'm on the laptop, so I have to struggle to see. Do you still feel like a douche when you're doing podcasts? Well, I've only done the one, and it seems like people liked it more than I anticipated. So I think when I do the one tonight for City, maybe I'll feel less douchey, but we'll see. Again, we'll see how much sleep I have, right? Your podcast is great. Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of it for me is just learning how to speak in a way that is more concise, because I tend to, when I start talking, I just tend to ramble. And so I want to be able to find a way to cut to the point. Okay, looking at all these questions, holy cow. Ya dingus, that's not a question. If you could pose that in the form of a question, that would be awesome. Okay, these are going past quick here. I'm going to have to see if I can catch some of them here in a way that I can focus on here. Just let me, give me a second here to look. All right. Okay, that's your thing, Ramblin' Dev. Is there any guitar pedals that you would love to use but you can't find any use for? I've been fortunate to have been provided with a lot of tools from a lot of companies, and some of those are certainly pedal companies. And I think as long as I've got a compressor and a delay and a reverb and another delay, then I'm pretty good. Are you finding time to get out and enjoy some nature? Yeah, I am. I'm going for walks, but at the same time, there's a lot of things to be done right now. Now, there's a lot of drama in terms of family and in terms of elderly people in my life, and just the logistics of trying to function during this period has been complicated and a lot of work. So yes, I'm trying to get out, and I'm trying to make sure that I remember to get out, because it's easy to get lost in the chaos of it all. What software do you use for mixing? I use Pro Tools specifically for mixing, but I've found myself learning Logic and really trying to consistently practice that, because that as a language has been very creative for me. There's a lot of things that Logic does, maybe not in the mixing front, but in the compositional phase, that I think is really conducive to my process. The main thing being the arrangement markers, where I can then identify the parts as I'm writing and then move them and have them in a way that I can. Oh my God, I'm so tired. In a way that I can experiment with arrangements. What's your secret for getting so jacked? Not being jacked. I remember when I was younger, looking at other males my age and wondering about the ones that when they did exercise, it would have a tangible effect on their bodies. You know, they would get the big muscles, or they'd get the bumpy bellies, or any number of things. And my physiology never really played into that. So for me, I exercise now, but that's only because I'm careening towards 50 years old, and I'd prefer not to go out as a result of just negligence on the part of my my physicality. So there is no jackness with Dev. What question have you always wanted to be asked but haven't been asked until now? Wow, there's a lot of questions. I had no idea. I'm so sorry. The questions that I wish I had been asked: would you like more coffee? And my answer to that is almost inevitably yes. All right. I hope your daily routine isn't too disturbed by all this quarantine thing. Oh my God, the questions keep going by. Oh, this is crazy. Is there any jacking it with Dev, though? Well, of course. I'm a human being. I am a jacking fool. Not as much, though. As I get older, I find. In fact, when I go on tour, I make sure that there's no jacking for a number of reasons. Number one, when you meet people who have an emotional investment in what you do, or you're touring with a bunch of people that you want to maintain your professional distance and your emotional distance from, I find that there's a real power in abstaining from that. To not have to think about sex is fantastic for me when I'm away. How has sleep and your mood been? Sleep is always terrible for me, and has been for 20 some odd years. I have insomnia, but it's a functional type of insomnia, where I have started to wonder recently if it's actually insomnia or if I just need less sleep than I assume. I don't necessarily feel tired all the time, but I certainly feel like when I stop doing things that are intellectually or emotionally engaging, I tend to fall asleep immediately, which is an indicator that I'm probably overtired. And my mood, I mean, as I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, I think a lot of my personal efforts during this quarantine period has gone into fighting back the depression that can happen, right? And the ways that I have found to do that recently has been maintaining a routine throughout the day that includes exercise and meditation and a normal structure. So I get up at 9 and I do these sorts of things. And I find that proactively, well, I thank you so much for the donation. I find that routine proactively carried out helps me fight off that depression. Is there another collaboration with 66 Samus in the works? Eventually, yeah. Sam is a fantastic talent. Thank you so much. I can't see the name. Utkanos 3. Thank you. Sam is a fantastic talent and a wonderful dude. And we have a lot of things. I mean, fortunately, I've got so many people in my life, and I feel that being able to have the options for drummers specifically allows me to say, okay, well, if I'm going down this avenue creatively, I know who to call. Ghostbusters. And if I'm going down this avenue, I know who to call. And to have an arsenal of musicians that, fortunately, at this point, are all kind of quarantined as well, makes it so that if I feel the need to go in the direction that Sam does things that no one else can do, then I think our relationship is good enough that we can call each other, right? What's your favorite song from Terry? I think my Ziltoid 3 featuring Sam, probably. If Ziltoid comes up again, there's a good chance that'll be Sam for sure. My favorite song from Terria is probably Mountain. How's it go? How's it go? Yes. Thank you for the donation, sir, ma'am. It's probably Mountain on Terria for me. And I think the reason for that is I tend to get melodically bored with myself fairly quickly. And I think that one thing that I have to be careful of, and one of the reasons why I enjoy music that is more straightforward a lot of times, more commercial. I like commercial music. And a lot of the reasons why I like that is because I think it's a way to interpret more basic melodic ideas in a way that the process becomes more intriguing to me than the melodic information. Thank you, sir. And so a song like Mountain was important to me because it was at a point when I was just really fatigued by my own melodic output. And to get that, you are so beautiful to me. It seemed like those intervals and that melodic information was fitting into the chords in a way that was strange but still worked. And I enjoy that. I enjoy that melodic participation in music very much. And a lot of times I tend to smooth over those awkward collisions in intervals with echo. And Mountain was a way that it was like making a very awkward jigsaw puzzle, and I enjoyed that a lot. Have you heard of Elephant Tree? I have not. What is your ultimate cup of coffee? I think any one that I get in the morning is good. Well, you know what I had recently that I thought was great was the guys at Waves, the plug-in company, brought me a bag of cardamom-scented Turkish coffee that you have to put into the cup, and then you let it sit and you tap the cup until the grains sort of puff up and then fall down. And that with a big chunk of Helva was an amazing coffee. Thank you, Cuban Missile Crisis. Get some rest. Yeah, no, I will. I will, for sure. For sure. It's not that I even feel under rested at this point. I just feel like I need to keep myself occupied in order to sort of quantify this and keep my emotional strength. I think it's very easy to just allow myself to just go to sleep. And so thank you again, sir. I think it's very easy to just fall asleep. And if in the past what's been proven to me is a defense mechanism against depression or during depression is just to get tired and fall asleep a lot. I wonder if a lot of this sort of quarantine stuff is that sort of lurking. So I want to make sure that I don't just stop. I feel the need to continue being creative at this point, almost like a way to counteract that sort of depression, I think, that comes with these things. But I also find that you guys and the ability to do this helps a great deal. And the fact, even with Empath, with that record, the whole idea of knowing that there's other people that are fighting that helps me a great deal as well. Is there any plan to make a new collaboration with Meshuggah and Gojira at some point? Thank you. Thanks, Edge Flash. That's nice. Frederick from Meshuggah is a really close friend of mine, and we send each other really disgusting memes daily. I sent him one this morning, and he sent me one last night. When I go to Sweden, I spend time with him, and we jam, but we don't record it. So we get together with some mutual friends, and we jam. He's got a great studio there. Thank you, Drummer Shy. He's got a great studio there, and we jam. But I think the reason why we're friends is the same reason why I don't want to record it. Because music to me is still this beautiful language. And doing it professionally, it's very easy to monetize your work to the point where your initial reasons for participating in music get lost in that blur of commerce. So a lot of times the people who I'm closest to, I would prefer not to record with. Maybe at some point, but we'll see. He's recording his record now, and we've talked about me doing some vocal thing on it or something, but if it's meant to happen, it will. And then in terms of Gojira, same thing. Thank you. Dave Brocky, back. Same thing with Joe. Joe's a good buddy, and we talk more than we participate musically with each other. Thank you, Private Kane. Have you any tips for staying motivated when it comes to the technicalities of making music? I think listening to yourself when you start feeling like you're burnt out. So a lot of what happens for me, and I think there's a need on some level for me to finish things that often gets in the way of the practicalities of life. I've just always been like, when I commit to something, I want to see it through, even if that means maybe I hold on to things before or later than I should. Like I remember with strapping, for example. I remember at the end of City thinking, okay, well, that's all I really need to say with this for myself. But I remember thinking, okay, well, I signed this 5-record deal, so it's important for me. It's more important for me to finish that commitment than it was for me just to get out. And when it comes to the technicalities of making music, what I would suggest for any of you who are struggling with that is, if you're frustrated with it, it's good to listen to that frustration and take some time away from it. I often find that I will go and I'll keep going, and I find myself frustrated and then predisposed by it at night, and I'll be dreaming about a song or dreaming about an editing issue, and then all of a sudden you snap out and you're like, why am I torturing myself with this? Maybe what's more important than the completion and the productivity is just letting it go for a few days and then coming back to it. And what typically happens is when you come back to it, or at least when I come back to it, I find that I have a different perspective on it that allows me to say, oh, okay, well, clearly the kick drum's too loud. Clearly the editing process that I was investing all this mental energy into is inefficient, and I was just too caught up in the momentum of it to see that at the time. So taking a break from it, I think, is great. Have you tried the neural DSP stuff? Yes. In fact, I had a conversation with Doug Castro this morning and last night, and he proposed doing a pack with me. But in line with the idea of commitment, thank you so much. In line with the idea of commitment, what I said to Doug is, I really like Doug. Doug is a great guy, and the neural stuff is brilliant. It's so good, so good. The Pliny pack and Nolly's work, it's so good. But I committed to Fractal years ago, and they've been super supportive of me. And Matt Picone at Fractal is a really good friend of mine too. And when I was just kind of getting going with the Fractal stuff, like he helped me model all my GP stuff, and he hooked me up with a bunch of people on the road, and it's a competing product in a way, and it's a really small industry. So I contacted Fractal and I said, hey, well, listen, Neural wants to do a thing with me. What do you think of that? And they, of course, because they're good people, they said, well, if you feel that's important for you to do, then you should absolutely do it. But just, to be fair, it's a competing product. So I told Doug this morning that I think it would be in our best interest for me to not, put my obligations and my commitments to Fractal in an awkward place. I think that I would do the same for him if I had been with Neural. Thank you. Thank you. If I had been with Neural and then Fractal proposed something to me, I would have had to tell them the same thing. It's the same thing with guitar companies. I am with Framus, and I've been offered a bunch of other endorsement deals, but Framus has been really good to me, and so I honor that. I play this Sadowski guitar as well, but only because Sadowski is now part of Framus, and I asked them, right? So I think Neural is a brilliant company, and I think their work is next level. But, I made a commitment to Fractal, and I love the Fractal stuff. So maybe that's more important to me than, that opportunity. All right. What's your favorite chord? It's a suspended second or a ninth. It has to be. It has to be this one. This I use that in everything. Everything. Use that with everything. And in open C tuning, it's like, it's basically just a power chord, right? But in this open C tuning, which is open C, G, C, G, C, E, whenever I play a power chord on what was the A string, it ends up in that kind of Police Edie Brickell chord, and that's awesome. That's my favorite chord. Spirits Will Collide is a healing song. It was for me too, because that was the whole idea of that album. I think a lot of times what we get proposed by people who do art professionally is that on some level we're, because we have a platform in which we're visible, that we're fundamentally different than the audience, which is an impression that I hope will not be able to sustain itself through this whole quarantine thing. Because I think it's important for people to recognize that what draws others into an artist's or a musician's work are the similarities as opposed to any differences, right? So there's that. What are some records that have influenced you the most? Let me see. Let's start from the very beginning. When I was 7, maybe 6, thank you, Texas Kate. I hope that's the same Kate that I know. If so, hope your life's good. From the beginning, when I was, 6 or 7, I found $2. We had $2 bills back then on the street, and my parents let me buy the Star Wars soundtrack because that was a huge deal for me as a kid. And I thought it cost $2, but I'm sure it didn't. I'm sure they sort of padded my treasure discovery there a touch. And that started it. I really liked the direct correlation musically that soundtrack provided between basic concepts like good and evil, like dark and light, if you want to look at it from that point of view. Like the Death Star had a theme, and the good guys had a theme, and the Sand People had a theme, and there was something very tangible about that, about those broad strokes of emotion that soundtrack provided. And I also, of course, was very interested in musicals as a kid. But then from there, the most profound record that influenced me was the soundtrack for The Dark Crystal. In fact, on the song Gatto off of Key, the solo is the main theme from The Dark Crystal. And that and Trevor Jones' work on there was just a huge influence to me. And then I got into more pop music, the Eurythmics, and all that sort of stuff. I used to do puppet shows with those for the neighborhood kids because I was totally not nerdy. But it was the album Keep Your Hands Off My Power Supply next by Slade. That one just totally tore me up. That was an amazingly influential record. Then probably Defenders of the Faith, Judas Priest, or Unleashed in the East, Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden, the self-titled Wasp album. And then I think as things got a little heavier, I really fell for Ride the Lightning by Metallica, and then Def Leppard Hysteria was massive for me, and I fell in love with a bunch of really sort of obscure new age albums. Valley of the Birds by Emerald Webb, and Soundtrek by Emerald Webb. Then the guitar stuff became very important to me. Mind's Eye, Maximum Security by Vinnie Moore and Tony McAlpine, Passion and Warfare by Steve Vai, Surfing with the Alien. Then it became, I think the two biggest albums for me was Nothing Shocking by Jane's Addiction and King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. And of course I loved all the Faith No More, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains stuff during that period. But then when I went and saw Mr. Bungle, whom I loved, there was a band opening for them called Grotus, and Grotus changed my entire view on music once again. And that was a huge thing for me as well, Grotus. Thank you. And then from there, it was probably Street Cleaner by Godflesh. Man, there's been so many. Fear is the Mind Killer and Soul of a New Machine by Fear Factory. Only Heaven by the Young Gods. Gash by Fetus. White Noise by Cop Shoot Cop. It's just endless. Songs of India. Chants of India by Ravi Shankar. Formula by Old Lady Drivers. That album changed everything for me. Darker by Light by Rapoon. I've listened to probably more than any record ever. Just been so many. I could go on and on and on. And the Trinity Sessions by Cowboy Junkies. Domination by Morbid Angel. Heartwork, Carcass. West Side Story, Leonard Bernstein. Gosh, onward. So I'll stop now. Okay, The Weather Girls. I love India mantra chanting. So peaceful. Same. In fact, I took that Ravi Shankar album, Chants of India, and then I ran it through a bunch of echo and made my own version of it. I just like hearing echo on everything. Maybe that'll change, right? Capachuca, Old Lady Driver, ever. Oh my God, they're moving quickly. Domination, yeah, that is a great one. How much of your own input went into sex and religion? I think not a lot. Thank you so much for the donation. Not a lot of my own input went into sex and religion, specifically as a tangible participant. Someone who says, okay, I think this chord should be like this and this vocal line should be like that. It wasn't that necessarily. It was very much Steve's vision. But I think my petulance, for lack of a better term, influenced that greatly for Steve. Another question is, what are you listening to now? What am I listening to now? I'm listening to my own wheels spinning around. I tend to listen to the recommendations that are provided for me by Spotify. And that goes in a lot of different directions. Actually, you know what I'm listening to a lot right now is Django Reinhardt. If you go on Spotify and just play the Django Reinhardt top songs, it's really interesting. It's got a vibe that I dig because there's this separate nature to that type of music and that sort of production. And maybe on some level it's the same reason I like music from the 20s and 30s. There's a sense that everybody who I'm listening to is no longer with us. And there's something comforting about that because it's not connected to anything that's going on currently. So if you're looking for something to listen to, there's two things. If you're on Spotify, number one, search 1910s playlist. I've listened to that a ton. And just look up Django Reinhardt and just see what you think of that. All right. Have you ever composed a song in your dream? Yeah, many. So some examples of songs that have been composed in a dream that then I wake up and either go to the studio or just try and write are so many. Ia in its entirety. I remember waking up and thinking that's the dumbest name for a song ever. But it didn't stop me. Effervescent from Epicloud, that whole everyone into forever, everything a part of me, dancing all into forever, effervescent quality. That was entirely in a dream, especially that descending interval. Effervescent quality. And so I woke up and I sang it into my phone and I mailed it to myself and then I recorded it later. Awake from Addicted. Time Overload. Big Nacho. Thank you. Time Overload is also a dream song. Notes from Africa off of Synkestra. It's a big part of the process. And I think that underlines one of my basic thoughts about what it means to be a musician, in that if you're wired to be a musician, I think you can continue to wire yourself further. And one of the ways that happens is that your role defines itself over time as being someone who listens rather than creates necessarily. I think it's very easy to think that, like, for example, I'm sitting here playing guitar and that what's coming out of me is something that I'm creating as much as I'm just participating with where I'm at. As I'm talking, my hands are moving to different chords. And I think if you are consciously listening to yourself, thank you, looking to score. I think if you're consciously listening to yourself, you find yourself in a position where you're privy to melodies, and that happens in your sleep. It happens when you're not trying to capture it in a way. So dream songs for me have been a big thing. It must have been about a donkey. Yeah, correct. ER was about a donkey. All right. So, would you ever be interested in doing a movie soundtrack? Yes, but it's never been offered, so I don't know if it's going to be something that will happen for me. And I think a lot of the reason why, if somebody was making a movie, they might want to choose somebody other than me. Thank you, Dremon. I think if somebody was making a movie, one of the reasons why they might want to choose someone other than me is my work functions best when I'm not told what to do. So, as a practical example of that, this quarantine project that I've been putting out, and the podcasts and all these, and the Twitch, and everything that's been going on, has been happening at a time when the management and the label and fellow musicians, everybody is so predisposed with the chaos of the COVID thing and the quarantine and all of this, that nobody has told me no. So I feel creatively very able to just put it out there, and without those filters that a lot of times get imposed on my creative process just by the practicalities of, okay, well, we need a 3-month window before we can release this song, or the mix for an album is done and then we need 4 months in order to send the first song to radio, and all these things that are just part of the process, and I understand that. But being able to do something where I'm like, okay, I record a song and I put it out the next day, and that's it. Is it something that defines my nature? No, no, no. It's just, it was creatively intriguing to me, and I function really well like that. And I think when it comes to making a movie, the idea of having to illustrate somebody else's vision would be challenging for me, in the same way that I don't like doing guest vocal spots, or I don't like, really collaborating in a lot of sense. I like just doing what I do. And if somebody wanted me to do a movie, it would have to be, the parameters would have to be, okay, we'll give you enough that you don't have to think about anything else, and then we won't tell you what to do. And I don't know how willing people would be to do that. Can you explain the Hummer? Oh my God, that's a loaded question. All right, no. So the Hummer, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, was an ambient record that I put out in about 2006. And it's on Spotify, actually. And if you listen to it, essentially it's just low frequencies that hum with sort of ambient chants behind it. Very kind of relaxed in a sense, but also ominous in another sense. And the reason why I created it is it was on the heels of the period of my creative output in which I produced Alien and Synkestra. And both those albums were intense, even though Synkestra acted in some way as a balm for the chaos that Alien had incited in my own mind and in my own personality. Synkestra was still a complex album and a complex sort of emotional component to it as well. So the Hummer almost acted like I wanted to make a destructive, peaceful sound that was just low frequencies. And I got this Nord synthesizer, and at that time I would go to the studio and I would find notes that when I played loudly, it would vibrate different things in the room differently. So the first note, I remember it would vibrate this vase on the shelf. And then the second note that I played, which is maybe track 2 or halfway through the first track, it would vibrate other things in the room differently. And then when you think about those experiments where they have a frequency on a steel plate that makes the patterns in the sand go according to what the frequency and the hertz are, it has always been clear to me on some level that the frequencies in which we produce and in which we participate with affect us in very specific ways that maybe we're not evolutionarily able to comprehend, but we can still sense that there is a feeling. You can sense it. One color or one frequency makes you happy, one of them makes you uncomfortable, one of them makes you feel calm, one makes you feel, agitated. So with the Hummer, I tried to find the frequencies that destructively, in a sense, made me feel less uh, agitated in the ways that both Alien and Synkestra made me feel just by having to articulate them. All right. Are you on some medications nowadays? No, sir, I am not. So, about 18 years ago, I had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I was consequently incarcerated for the same thing. I was in a mental hospital for months. But at the time, when I went in for the consultation with the psychiatrist or the psychologist, because I was acting in ways that were very destructive towards myself, towards the people in my life, and acting on those impulses in a way that was counterproductive for almost every aspect of my life. The questions that I was asked, the psychologist was able to check off the categories in which my answers implied to him that I was exhibiting signs of bipolar disorder. So they put me into the hospital and they put me on antipsychotic medications and antidepressant medications. And I was that way for 10 years. I was on those medications for 10 years. And then when we were about to have children, I remember questioning the diagnosis. And so when I say that, there's a lot of people who are perhaps on antipsychotic medications and absolutely should be. So what I will add as a caveat to my questioning of those medications is I questioned them with a psychiatrist, with a psychologist. I don't know the distinction at this point. And I went and I said, I would like you to entertain the thought that as opposed to the diagnosis of bipolar being an accurate diagnosis, I'd like you to entertain the thought that I was on a lot of drugs back in the day. I had gone through the Steve Vai experience. I had spent my childhood as a child who, in a lot of ways, was told that, I could do no wrong, in a way. You kind of get that golden boy diagnosis from your family, And then I moved to Los Angeles, and I had these experiences that were overwhelming. And it was a combination of a type of arrogance, a type of naivety, and a type of insecurity that compounded by the fact that as a child I never did drugs, I never tried drugs, I never drank, I never did anything. I didn't have any girlfriends. It was like I was really naive. Then I went and did all that stuff in Los Angeles, and we did all these tours, and the record got dealt not only some compliments, but also a lot of criticisms. And a lot of those criticisms were levied at the fact that Steve Vai, who was a guitar player that people loved, all of a sudden had this kid screaming over top of his music. And I didn't know how to deal with it. And then when things got really popular, the record did very well in Japan, and we did all these tours with like Aerosmith and The Tonight Show and all this. And I moved to the UK after that, and I joined the Wild Hearts, this band from Newcastle, with some, of my greatest friends of all times. And I just said, fuck it, I'm going to start drinking, I'm going to start doing drugs, I'm going to start, engaging in all these activities. And having that concoction of psychological tinder together and then throwing acid and mushrooms and psychedelics on top of that, I interpreted that experience, that psychedelic experience, that a lot of times people who have had those experiences or are well versed in that would be able to say, okay, the experiences that you're participating in are very common. These are experiences that a lot of people participate in whilst going through that. Yet, I interpreted those experiences as, oh, I'm the center of the universe. This is all me. And I reacted to that psychological manifestation of those drugs and that experience that I had had prior and my naivety in my youth in a way that when I was being asked questions from the doctor, I was responding in a way that was very much in line with schizophrenia, bipolar, etc. So when we started to have kids about 13 years ago, I went to the same psychologist and I said, I would like you to consider that the diagnosis that I have is maybe incorrect. And on your approval, I would like to try coming off of these medications while coming to you twice a week. And if at any time I exhibit the behavior that presents to you the fact that this is a mistake on my part, and that yes, this is a clinical diagnosis and case for bipolar, then my hands are up and I will accept that diagnosis. But if it turns out that maybe this is just, I fucked up and I was in a really bad place and I made a bunch of mistakes that I feel profound guilt for, maybe we can find a different way around that. And so he agreed. And over the course of 3 years, I came off that medication. But at the same time, you can't self-medicate. There's the biggest thing. It's like you come off of these medications, you're like, yeah, good. See, I'm fine now. Now's the time to start drinking and smoking dope and doing all these things. It's like you've got to be very careful with your mind, specifically if you're wired in such a way that there's either a genetic predisposition for mental illness or you've exhibited those behaviors in the past. So I don't recommend that, but in the light of full disclosure, that's where I'm at. All right. Let me see what we got here. Yes, it can be fatal if you don't listen. Exactly. Let's see. For those of us who have an old GP100, any chance of sharing some settings? I don't even know what the settings are anymore, but I'll give you an overview. It was the USA 2. It was the USA 2 amp, and it was the cab that went with it. It had the compressor setting at about 80%. It was a ping pong delay that was set to about 300 milliseconds, and it had a 10-second reverb after. There you go. Okay. So yeah, people are asking here more about mental health. I will say again, and I hope that I'm loud and clear here. I don't know. And I do not recommend anything when it comes to mental health other than dealing with it with a licensed professional who can help you in the ways that you need to be helped for your very specific psychology. Because it is so easy to make assumptions on your mental health, specifically when it comes to bipolar, where you're like, oh, I'm fine now. Because the difference between being fine and being not fine can be one experience, one trauma. So keep in mind that mental health on all levels, whether or not it's depression or clinical diagnoses of things such as schizophrenia, bipolar, etc., can be fatal and can be profoundly damaging to your family and to your friends. That you owe it, in my opinion, to the people whom you care about and to the people who care about you to deal with this in a responsible manner. Don't listen to musicians. Don't listen to random websites on the internet. What you need to do is you need to listen to your intuition. You need to listen to the people who are around you, and you need to deal with it in a responsible manner. So please keep in mind that anything I say about my own experiences are not only my specific experiences, but they were also hand in hand with licensed professionals. So I can't be clear enough about that. Okay. Yeah, there's a perfect, go to your doctor and be as honest as possible, even if it's embarrassing. Absolutely. What's your relationship like with Jason Newsted? I think Jason's great. We don't talk. We had some really weird experiences together. We spent about 3 really weird years together. And at the end of that time, I think we both realized that we don't have a whole lot in common. But I care for him a great deal, and he was super kind to me. So I love Jason. I just don't know really what we have to talk about. What's your best life tips? Stay hydrated. Cut yourself some slack. Take care of yourself when it comes to mental health. Recognize that your actions affect others. Recognize that a lot of times you can't see the ways in which you are affecting others. So listen to the honest opinions of the people who you trust the most. And, don't take any wooden nickels. All right. Are you working on the new Misery Signals album? I helped Jesse record vocals for the new Misery Signals album. They asked me to do production, and I said, please don't ask me to produce. I do not want to produce anybody right now. Nobody. I hate producing, specifically right now. I just want to do my own shit. But Jesse, who I've known since he was 15, like when I used to practice with Strapping a Lad with Adrian, Jesse would be this 14-year-old, 15-year-old kid that would just he had long hair, and he was in a band called Pugnacious, and he would just hang out on the floor and just watch us jam. I mean, now Jesse's got kids, and he's a school teacher, and he's just an amazing dude. I mean, I just love Jesse, and he was just like, please help me record the vocals. And I was like, fuck. So I helped him because he's Jesse, and I love him, but I didn't produce it. All right. How's the Ziltoid game concept going? It was going great until I lost interest. And the people at the Ziltoid video game company, I say with my hand on my heart, I'm really sorry. If I do something and it is something I want to do, I truly feel that the audience who I'm so fortunate to have had participate with me through the years, like maybe some of you, will be like, okay, yeah, I can accept that. The reason why Casualties of Cool is a good record to me and to the people who like that record is because my interests were very much in making Casualties of Cool exactly what the vision was implying to me. If I wasn't into it, it would suck. And that's with anything. Like people are saying to me often, oh, you need to do heavy music again. But the only reason I put out that heavy song the other week is because I was into it. But then after I finished it, I wasn't into it anymore. And I have structured my life creatively and professionally in such a way that there's not people who are relying on me. Anytime that I've had people rely on me in the past, like whether it was DTP or SYL or anything, when all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, I'm not interested in this right now, I want to do something else, then all of a sudden I'm letting a bunch of people down. And the Ziltoid game was one of these unfortunate situations that when we first started, I was like, yeah. Hang on a second. I gotta answer a text. Hang on 2 seconds. 2 seconds. So when it came to the Ziltoid game, I had started, and then I couldn't find the interest in it. So I have had to postpone it, and I'm really sorry to the people who are doing that game. All right. Casualties, Key, and Ghost are my favorite albums you've ever done. Well, thank you. The problem with my career, and this is something that I find humorous in a sense, is I love, of course, Casualties, Key, and Ghost. Of course. I mean, that's exactly where I was at. But I also loved Strapping, Deconstruction, Ziltoid. Like all these things were a part of my nature. And I find I get this audience that oftentimes is split. We have people saying, I hate Ghost, and I love Strapping. Or I hate Key, and I love Deconstruction. And I find that funny because it's all the same thing. It's just a different coat on the same personality, right? So the only thing that I can do as a creator is just not pay too much attention to what people like or dislike, and pay close attention to where I'm at. And if that means sometimes projects go by the wayside, like the game or whatever, then at least I know that what I'm putting out for people is going to be something that is of enough emotional authenticity that the people who truly understand where I'm coming from are like, oh yeah, of course, that's what you're doing. Of course you're doing Ghost. Of course. It makes perfect sense. Thank you for the donation. Kelsifer 88. I love the dynamic between heavy and ambient. It makes it much more expressive. Yeah, I mean, it's life, isn't it? It's life. I mean, anybody who just wants one, I end up thinking, I wonder if we're in denial of another part of our nature here. And please also recognize that I'm happy that people like any of it. There's people like one song that I've done and hate the rest of it. That's totally cool. Because I'm ultimately just trying to make music to contribute something, something positive, to be able to help in some ways by articulating this information that as an artist I feel privy to. That's great. But it certainly doesn't mean that I'm going to do one thing in favor of the other. What it means, in my estimation, is that if there's people who really like a certain aspect of what I do, and they're waiting for the fact that it doesn't exist without its opposite. It's absurd to think that. And even with Strapping, even with some of the brutal stuff, throughout it, there's always a thread of optimism. And without that thread of optimism that requires things that are its opposite, it's just going to be toxicity for the sake of, trying to make money. I only like the Hummer. I've said that many times on my own front. It's a hard way to start a date, though. All right. Is there music in your discography that you don't like? Um, yeah, sure. I mean, some days I don't like any of it. I mean, it's interesting to me to think that there's artists out there that prefer their own music over anybody else's. To me, music to me is a function of just trying to uh, understand myself. It's a byproduct of that. So sometimes I don't like it just because it reminds me of a certain part of myself that I feel the need to exercise. But even within that, it's necessary to the point where I will commit to doing it accurately. So there'll be times where people will just be like, oh, I really don't like this album. And I'm like, well, of course. Why would you? Thank you, Soup. All right. More hardcover copies of Only Half There. Okay. I never realized you were in the Wild Hearts. Yeah, Willie Dowling. Yeah, we were in the band together. We did the Reading Festival. Thank you, Matt M. Blatt. Yeah, Willie's really talented too. Yeah, but if you look online, Reading Festival Wild Hearts '93, you'll see me with a really shitty haircut, and Willie was in the band at that point. How did I meet Gene? I moved back to Los Angeles in 1996. I remember because I had been there with the Steve I project and hated it, but felt on whatever level the need to sort of move back there to figure out if I could uncover something that seemed to be unfinished business. And at that time, I was with Century Media Records, and the guy who was the A&R guy was Borovoy Kurgan, who is the owner and operator of blabbermouth.net. And I asked him if I could move in with him and Eula Garrett, who was and still is the lawyer for. He works with Century Media and Inside Out. I just talked to him this morning, and Clandestine Music is his company. But Borovoy and Eula were sharing an apartment in Marina del Rey, and I decided to move in there. And I slept on their couch for months. Just listened to Morbid Angel. And I wrote City and a lot of Ocean Machine on Bori's couch. And while I was in LA, I went with Bori to a Machine Head concert at the Palace in LA, or the Palladium, I forget the name, starts with a P. And Bori was there, and or not Bori, Gene was there, and a mutual friend said, "Oh, Gene really liked the first Strapping record, and he'd like to meet you." And we were both shit-faced. And he was like, "Hey, my name's Gene." I was like, "Hey, my name's Dev. I've got another record written, and I'd like to start recording in 2 weeks, so would you please play on it?" And he was all hammered, and he said yes, but didn't remember. So I called him the next day, and I was like, "Hey, man, we met last night, and you said you'd play on the new Strapping record." And he was like, "Did I?" Gene's great. I love Gene. He's just one of the best metal drummers, period, ever. It was good to hang out with him at NAMM, too. I love Gene, man. He was a fantastic guy. Maybe the ship has sailed between us creatively, but I'll never feel anything for that guy other than just profound bro love. Do you feel like a rock star? Fuck no. I think the idea of rock star is a mental illness that has been perpetuated by Rat videos and Motley Crue videos in the 80s. I think that leads a lot of people to assume that, for example, the touring life in 2020 is something much different than it is. They assume it's not, what's it? Thank you, Sabion. They assume that the touring life is not cow-class flights 7 times over the course of 2 months to Europe with no sleep. You know what I mean? And I don't feel that I would ever want to do anything other than what I do. number one, I can't. I'm not qualified. But I don't want to put across the idea that it's like that you're hard done by doing this stuff. Far from it. But it's certainly a different scene than I think people may assume. And I think that anybody who portrays themselves as being fundamentally more important than their audience is like maybe in for a rude awakening when times like this happen. You know, I play a role, and the audience is part of that procedure. And I don't like the term fans. I like the term audience. There's a lot of people who listen to what I do that are, you know, doctors or lawyers or, you know, people who serve a function in society that is every bit and in many cases much more important than what I would do. So my role is to become the most proficient at articulating my creative vision that I can, and that is far removed from the idea of rock star. I think that's more you're just trying to do a good job, right? I'm going to have to get going here pretty quick. All right. Will you ever make low-tuned 7-string music like Synkestra? Thank you, sir. Uncle Fungus. Well, in the same way that I would suggest the problem with the Ziltoid game occurred, it poses the same problem when it comes to trying to choose to do a certain type of music. You know, I didn't choose to do Synkestra in a certain way. That's how all the aspects of that particular part of my life ended up focusing its viewpoint into. I'll give an example of how that creative process works, in that I'm a vision-based writer, but that vision doesn't exist in the form of a certain song, certain chord, certain lyric, certain melody. It's not like that in the slightest. Thank you, my friend. Again, thank you. How it functions is that the vision is based on a specific set of emotional circumstances that occurred during a certain period of my life. And that can be in line with any number of things. It can be in line with participating in the birth of a child or the death of a loved one or losing your virginity or some profound or even subtle emotional shift in your consciousness that occurs throughout your life. During that period of emotional significance, it's almost like there is something that imprints itself on my creative psyche that I think this is important enough for me to chase the feeling of, so that when an audience listens to the music, what they're participating in is a replica or a very blunt like copy of that same emotional moment that was significant enough to me to compel me to follow that. So then the creative process from that point becomes much less chasing a certain sound, but much more so finding out what it isn't until you're left with what it is. So I tend to go down these rabbit holes while I'm recording that frustrate a lot of people around me, specifically the label, because they say, what's the next album you're going to do? And I'm like, I think it's, for example, with Accelerated Evolution, I'm like, oh, it's a pop record. And by the time it was done, it wasn't a pop record at all. But there was an element of that kind of commercial aesthetic that was a part of what it was that was emotionally significant to me during its gestation. And then as I start to uncover it, I think, okay, well, maybe it's this pop record, so I'll write a bunch of stuff that's like commercially slanted. And then by doing that, I'll recognize, no, it wasn't that actually. There's an aspect of it, and that aspect could be as simple as a certain font, a certain chord, a certain guitar sound, a certain tuning. And then I'll take from that experience, okay, it wasn't that, but this aspect of it was correct. And then you follow that. And then as the record progresses, it's more a process of elimination of what it isn't, until by the end you're like, oh, okay, I guess it's called accelerated evolution. I guess the color is this kind of steelish blue gray thing. I guess it has this as its aesthetic, this as its font, this as the members, this is the people, this is its playing order. And then by the end, you surprise yourself. And then it's in hindsight that I find by listening to the record, you can say, oh, this record was dealing with death, or this record was dealing with birth, or this record was dealing with loss, or this record was dealing with paranoia, or drugs, or psychiatric medication, or whatever it was. And as a result, the creative process becomes ultimately a way for you to retroactively understand yourself, in hopes, if your intention is what I believe mine is, of making yourself more functional. And then through that process, hopefully other people can hear in that those moments of emotional significance to you, that then they can say, oh, okay, well, this relates to me as well in some way. And then this is why I've always held to the idea that through the music, if people are resonating with it, they're not resonating with the artist. They're resonating with that parcel of truth that through your own bias and your own trip, you're able to translate. And so when it comes to doing down-tuned songs like Synkestra, the only reason that was the case at that time is because through that same process, which has been the same since the very beginning, that's what became clear to me that record was. And that's it. So it's absurd for me to try and replicate something or to even plan things. I just have to keep playing. And then hopefully what comes out is something that is accurate. Thank you, my friend. So I'm going to go. I got to deal with so much shit today. I really appreciate everything. I'm going to do another podcast, hopefully for tomorrow, on City. And I'll just go through each album sequentially. And I'll get back to Heavy's a Really Heavy Thing and Punky Brewster. They just don't interest me as much. And hopefully that will keep you with some form of entertainment during this period. I'm going to put out the Quarantine Project with a bunch more songs. There's another 5 songs I'm working with. We're going to do a physical release of that, but it will also be online, of course. I'm just uploading the podcast now to Anchor, so I'll have a podcast channel, so it'll be downloadable in all these typical sort of Spotify podcasting sort of avenues. And then the next time I do Twitch, I mean, I'll give you a heads up, but I'm also planning a couple of concerts. We're going to do a like $5 to watch it, $10 to get a download of it, and then all the proceeds from that will go to several of the hospitals, one in Vancouver, one in the UK, one in New York. I mean, there's so many to choose from that it's like, but all the proceeds will go to that. And then we'll just keep functioning. And again, I would ask you all to keep your head up, and I know it's difficult to battle through these ramifications of quarantine and the ups and downs of everybody, you know, the loss and the financial implications of it all. And take good care of yourself. Take good care of your psychology. Try not to, if I have any say in this whatsoever, try not to devolve into just alcohol or something in the time off, as easy as it is, you know. Maybe go do some yoga. It does wonders for your brain just to get the blood pumping, right? And Friday, have a glass of wine or something. You guys take care of yourself, and I will see you soon, okay? Thank you for the support, and